Hi, I'm Dr. Mike, and this is NFGeeks. Well, today is Thursday, and on Thursdays on the NFGeeks Facebook forum it's theme day, where I pick a theme and make a video about that theme, and I encourage others to make a video as well, or at least comment on this video or some of the other videos. And today's theme is a heavy theme, and that theme is going to be war. I'm going to talk about war today. And that's obviously because war looms at the moment. Decisions are being made whether Syria is to be attacked or not, for the chemical weapons. And so it's sort of in the air, and so I thought it'd be good to talk about it. Now, my video is going to sort of specifically be about my NF experience, as an ENFP, with war and things related to war. So, I just sort of want to preface that the discussion of the philosophical or political or historical implications of war are very important. But I guess I just want to sort of alert everybody that this isn't one of those videos. People can comment like that and, make their own videos like that. They're totally legit. But I'm not going to be talking about that. I'm not going to be talking about whether or not we should call it the French and Indian War or the 7 Years' War, or whatever. Okay, this isn't one of those videos. It's really more about my own personal experience with war and ideas of war, and just sort of contemplating it as an NF. So all right, so I'll get right to it. The first thing I want to talk about is my first true adult understanding of war and how it affects me. Okay, and that came just before the Gulf War, about 20 years ago. Okay. Prior to that, any understanding I had about war was based on Hollywood movies, and childlike assertions of winning and yay, and we won the war and that kind of thing. Maybe video games, things like that. I was into Missile Command. That's going way back, which is sort of this Cold War. You have to defend the cities from atomic weapons that are coming down. So, but still, that's really just sort of games, and not really having a true understanding of it. But when the Gulf War came around, is where my first really true adult understanding of war and myself, and it had a profound impact on me. Okay, now you have to understand is that prior to the Gulf War, okay, which was in the early 1991, we didn't know it was going to be this blowout, it was going to be over in a day. Okay, we really did not know that. So there's a lot of angst in 1990, moving, in terms of what was going to happen as we moved closer and closer to early 1991. Okay, we did not, realize it was going to be that way. One of the reasons is that was just this general fear of being stuck in this war, ironically, in light of the past 10 years. But being stuck in this war the way we were stuck in the Vietnam War. Okay, so the Vietnam War was really the only war that we as Americans had as a visual frame as to what war was about and what war should look like. Okay, so what we imagined was soldiers and Bell helicopters and and things like that. Okay, and just being stuck in the jungles, and we also didn't realize how much American technology had changed in terms of the military. Okay, specifically from the 80s buildup, from the Cold War. We didn't, because we hadn't seen it. I mean, it hadn't, we hadn't been in a real war, so there hadn't been, we didn't see our tanks, and we didn't see our soldiers, and we didn't see the missiles. We didn't see how everything was going to be. So there was this great fear, okay? You know, like, we didn't know that the missiles, you know, could do ding dong ditch, you know, where they could come down and then ring the doorbell and then go around the house and the guy comes out, then it comes back and blows it up. You know, we didn't know that our technology was like that. That was the really first time that we had seen that. So prior to the war, there was a lot of fear going on. I mean, there was also patriotism and all sorts of stuff that goes on with that, but there was also a real fear and a real angst about, oh my God, is this the next Vietnam? You know, so we really didn't know the way it was going to go down. All right. So at that time, I think I'm 21, 22, no, 21. I'm 21 years old, and I was in Boston sitting with two old high school friends at Northeastern in the cafeteria. And we were just sort of sitting around talking, you know, reminiscing or whatever. I was just kind of hanging out with them. And of course, because we're all young men, we start talking about the war. We start talking about the Gulf War, okay? And what's interesting is their responses, because what they started talking about is what would happen if it would have happened if they got drafted, because we were worried about being drafted. Again, we didn't know. What would happen if they got drafted, and what would they do, and you know, how would they parlay this into their life careers that they really want to have now that we're at the end of college, okay? So my good friend, he was my best friend in high school, he's an ESTJ, and his response was so SJ looking back on it. Like, his response was, you know, if you gotta go, you gotta go. You know, that was his response to the draft. I'll never forget it. That's exactly what he said. That was his response to the draft. Well, if you gotta go, you gotta go. But his larger thinking that was that, you know, this would be good experience for being a police officer. Again, classic ESTJ stuff. But he wanted to be a police officer, and he is. He's a police sergeant. But he felt that would be good experience in terms of learning, you know, military weapons, and, you know, maybe he could, you know, do ROTC or something, become a military cop, and, you know, military police. That would be good experience. And so, you know, he sort of saw it as a good career thing. Now, my other friend, who's an NT, he was going into pre-med he was in pre-med at that time, and he's a doctor. Okay, he is a doctor right now, and he said he was saying how he could take his knowledge from the military and apply it to medicine if he could get into a MASH unit. You know, that's what he would want to do, kind of show his credentials that he was pre-med. You know, if he had his, you know, his degree, that, you know, he'd be an officer or whatever. So he tried to get into MASH, into a MASH unit, and do something there. If not, obviously he couldn't be a real doctor, but he'd do something. You know, be a phlebotomist if he had to. So, you know, because that would help him, and it would be his field, and he could parlay that. Okay, so that's what they're talking about. Okay. Now, on the issue of whether to go or not, I actually had a pretty, even though NFs, you might think that NFs would go and hide under the bed and run to Canada. I didn't. That wasn't on my mind. My mind was actually, you know, very sort of value based, and I remember thinking this, that, you know what, you can't pick and choose when you want to be a citizen. Okay, if you're a citizen, and then you're bound to certain duties and responsibilities and all that. So that was sort of where I was. But so we're having this conversation about what to do and what we would do if we got drafted and all that. And so they talk about their things, and I turned to them and I said, yeah, all right, but I'm going to have a bachelor's in social work. I mean, you know, what are the military going to do with me? You know, sort of rhetorically asking. And my NT friend turned around to me and said, they're going to give you a gun. And the two of them started laughing. They thought that was hysterically funny. I didn't think that was funny, as you can imagine, because the realization of what that meant in terms of war suddenly hit me. Okay, you know, in the movies sometimes where they have a close up on the person and then the background's coming close, that warp, you know, sort of close up, you know, that takes place. That's what it felt like. Okay, really. And here's what here's why. Okay, and this is sort of, again, knowing you're an NF without knowing you're an NF. It's not that I was afraid to die. Of course, everyone who goes to war is afraid of dying, and I would be very afraid of dying, just like anyone else. But that wasn't my biggest fear. And one of the reasons why it wasn't my biggest fear is just that I figured statistically it was in my favor that I would live. Again, I didn't know it was going to be this giant blowout, but I figured, you know, it's the United States, big military, you know, we're pretty big. Chances are, you know, most of the people who go to this war are going to come back. There's going to be casualties, there always is, but even under the worst case scenarios, I figured I had a better chance of living than dying, okay? But that's not what scared the hell out of me. What really scared the hell out of me after he said that, and I lost sleep over this, like literally, I remember looking up at the ceiling in my bedroom and just being all upset about it, is that not so much that I would die, but that I would have to kill people, okay? That I'd be expected to kill people. And the reason why that's awful is because I knew that I would be one of those who came back crazy, okay, from doing that, from the horror of war and killing people. I was going to be one of those PTSD people, okay, just like the Vietnam vets, the Vietnam vets who had PTSD, who came back. That I was going to be one of them. I was going to, if I went to this war, I was going to get a gun. They were going to put me right out in the desert, and I was going to see people die. People are going to die by my own hand. Who knows? Children, women, and I would come back crazy. Okay, and now speaking now as an NF, now as an adult, that wasn't a correct assessment of myself. I'm kind of proud. NFs are very self-aware. Well, NFPs in particular, and I absolutely would have came back crazy. I know myself. Look, like I've said this a bunch of times on NF Geeks, I can't even watch the videos where the skaters hurt themselves going down the steps. Okay, that is too much to bear. All right, heads getting blown off and dead children and bodies on fire, over and over and over and over again. I would lose my mind. I would definitely not do well under those under those contexts, and I would come back crazy, and I would be crazy for the rest of my life over that. Probably become a drug addict. I mean, who knows? The way people with PTSD from war self-medicate. So that's my first experience, is sort of understanding what would happen, that I would be one of those people who come back from war altered and crazy, and I knew that then. And it's true, looking back, I would have. So that's the first NF experience. The second one I've sort of talked about, I think, in a video. I forget what I talk about. I've made so many videos now. I don't know. I probably repeat myself 78 times, but what can I do? And this has to do with the Iraq War. Okay, the very controversial Iraq War, which is still controversial. Interestingly, all the wars from the Gulf War to now, including Syria, are definitely in one way impacted or shaped by the Gulf War. For example, the funny thing about the Iraq War is we had it backwards. In the Gulf War, we thought, oh my God, we're going to be in there forever, and it's going to be horrible in the next Vietnam. And no, it's over in a day. And then in the Iraq War, we're like, this is going to take like a couple of months. We'll be out of there, by Christmas. And that's not what happened. But whether that's right or wrong isn't the point here. The point is the NF moment I had about the Iraq War, and it really shows, again, knowing you're an NF without knowing you're an NF, and really sort of tuning in. And it was some of you might not remember, but before the Iraq War, Colin Powell, who was the Secretary of State, went to the United Nations to sort of sell it to the United Nations, because they were trying to build allies. George W. Bush was trying to build the allies that his father had built so well for the Gulf War. George Herbert Walker Bush had created this total coalition of vast amount of allies, and that's one of the reasons why it worked. World opinion was on our side, and he was trying to do that. George W. Bush, not as successful as we know, but one of the things was Colin Powell going to the United Nations, Secretary of State, going to the United Nations to sell it to the Security Council, and specifically that Iraq had weapons of mass destruction, as we all remember. So I'm watching this, okay, because I'm into this. When things happen in the world, I always pay attention. And the NF moment I had, and boy, I remember this, is that the second Colin Powell came on the screen and I saw his face and saw him, I knew there was no weapons of mass destruction. That was it. I mean, here's the good news and the bad news. He did sell me. He sold me within 2 seconds. Okay, but the thing was that there was no weapons of mass destruction. I just could tell by his face, just by like the NF stuff, listening to him, that I was completely convinced that there were none. And I said it out loud. I remember this. I said, "Oh my God, there are no weapons of mass destruction," because he didn't believe it. Okay, he didn't believe it. and it really sort of hit me. Then all the NF stuff came in, that, oh my God, we're going into this war. They're going to find there's no weapons. This is going to be a disaster. Everyone's going to hate us. We should not be doing this. This is terrible. Saddam Hussein, there's nothing to do with Al Qaeda. This is crazy, and sort of feeling the gloom, coming, over the horizon. I'm sure many NFs did with that. I'm sure many NFs were sort of emotionally feeling the gloom, about it. So that's that. That's that thing. That's a sad one. So I want to end on a happier one, or one that amuses me a lot in a good way, and that is about these some of my fellow students in my doctoral program. I went to in my doctoral program were a lot of military officers, mostly the United States Navy, because they were from the Naval War College. And but there were Marines, there were all sorts of different officers, but all officers who taught, very educated guys, multiple master's degrees, and they were getting a PhD to sort of make themselves more accredited, teaching at the War College. Okay, so you get a master's degree at the War College, and so they were doing that. And so these are all officers, commanders, lieutenant commanders, career guys. They may be retired or they're not, in service, but they still work for the Navy or the government, whatever, at the War College. And one time I was going into class with this guy. He was a pilot in the Navy. He was a teacher now, and I don't know, somebody had said something to him, and he was very upset. And I said to him, I said, Scott, what's up, man? How you doing? And he says, boy, I'm not doing too bad, since I'm a baby killer. That's what he said. Obviously, something had crossed his path about being called a baby killer, or he read something. I don't know where it came from. Okay, he might have thought that I had said it. Maybe because sometimes I thought that I was totally liberal, and sometimes I wasn't. Sometimes I wasn't. Can't pin an ENFP down. I don't think it was because of me. I think he was just annoyed. Somebody had said it, and he was upset, and so he said it to me. Okay. I remember my answer was sort of like I gave a jackass answer, like, well, have you killed any babies? Something like that. So one impression that we have of military people is that they are these horrible Viking, people that just pillage and rape and kill babies and all that. Okay. And he was very offended of that, and that's not true. Now, the other side of it, though, is their interpretations of themselves, which is also not true, okay? They see themselves as, the knights at the round table, with swords and honor, and they're on quests, for the king, and, they see themselves in this very sort of fantasy-like, way of, or like John Wayne. Any John Wayne World War II movie, like The Longest Day or something, sometimes it gets into that. But, it's all sort of this very sort of propped up image. And I always thought both of those were wrong, and I only realized I was sort of NFing the whole thing and ENFPing the whole thing, because I understood exactly what they actually were. And what they actually were, these War College guys, were very boring suburbanites. Okay, that was their reality. Okay, because that's what gave them anxiety. That's where their focus was all the time. That's all they talked about. They weren't talking about war strategy or anything. The only thing they ever talked about was they had to get mulch. And they had to get the car payments due, and they got to bring the daughters over to the soccer practice. And when are they going to get to go to Home Depot, and whose in-laws they're going to go to this Thanksgiving. That was their entire reality. That's the only thing they ever talked about. That's where they actually were. Boring. My life as an ENFP was far more exciting than these guys. Okay, their life was coma inducing. And again, just sort of knowing that without them saying it, you know what I mean? Like, that whatever debate that was going on in class between conservatives or whatever, just still like hearing it and whatever, but really just knowing that, these guys just live in a suburban town and, they drive minivans. I mean, they're not, they're really not doing anything that terrible or that exciting. I mean, really boring stuff. Oh God, can you imagine? So that's it. That's my stuff about war, and I probably have a bunch of other things, but I don't want this to go on and whatever. But I think it matters because I think temperament and type see war and experience war very differently. Okay, obviously they experience it differently, but I think there's major sort of interesting ways that war affects us, and we're affected through our type, and we're affected through our temperament, and I think that makes a big difference. In fact, I'm pretty sure that lots of people who come back from war with PTSD are NFs, that's for sure. And I would bet that many of them are just Fs straight up. The ISFPs, the ISFJs. I wouldn't be surprised. I realize anybody can come back with PTSD before all the thinkers get all, whatever. But certainly, I'm pretty sure that NFs do not do well in war, and I'm sure that many of them had a difficult time and came back crazy, as I would have too. I certainly would have come back crazier than I am now. Crazy in a bad way. All right, so that's it. So talk about type and war, and I can't wait to see the responses. This one should be very fascinating. All right.